The Valorian coalition controlled a large section of the galaxy. 7 different alien species worked together to keep peace and protect their worlds. They had built great cities, strong defenses, and formed laws that all of them followed. For hundreds of years, the coalition had remained safe. They believed nothing could break them. But the Krell Empire was different. The Krell were a species born for war. They did not ask for peace or friendship. They attacked without warning. They destroyed entire colonies and took the people as slaves. Every world they found became a target. Every species they met became an enemy. The Krell moved through space like a storm, leaving nothing but ruins behind them. The coalition fought back, but they were losing. In battle after battle, the Krell weapons proved stronger. The Krell soldiers fought without fear of death. They did not stop or retreat. They only advanced. By the time the coalition understood the true danger, the Krell had already destroyed 17 planets and killed millions of people. The coalition's great military was falling apart. Lieutenant Commander Kevin Hart worked at Kepler Station, a human outpost on the edge of space. He was a Terran Marine, one of humanity's finest warriors. Kevin Hart had trained hard for years. He knew how to lead men and women into danger. He understood tactics and weapons. But like every other human, he had never fought a real war against alien forces. The transmission came in the middle of the night shift. The radio signal was broken and weak, but the message was clear. The Valorian coalition needed help. They were under attack. Their defenses were failing. They asked for any military force that could respond. Kevin Hart brought the message to Captain Lisa Monroe. She was the leader of the entire Terran fleet in this region of space. Captain Monroe was a tall woman with gray in her hair. She had been a soldier for 30 years. She read the transmission twice before speaking. "How many ships can we send?" she asked. "We have 12 warships ready to jump," Kevin Hart said, "plus 3 transport vessels and 6 medical ships. The Valorian Council will not want our help," Captain Monroe said. "They think we are primitive. They believe our technology is too old. They said we should remain on our own worlds and not interfere in coalition matters." "The transmission did not care about that," Kevin Hart replied. "They are dying. They need anyone who can fight." Captain Monroe stood and walked to the window. She looked out at the stars. She thought about the millions of people being killed. She thought about what it meant for humanity to join a real galactic war. She thought about the soldiers who would die under her command. "Send the jump order," she said. "All ships that can move, prepare for hyperspace. We leave in 1 hour." The message spread through Kepler Station fast. Every human knew what this meant. They were about to fight against an enemy they had never faced before. They were about to leave human space and enter a war between species much older and much stronger than them. Some soldiers were afraid. Some were excited. All of them prepared for battle. Kevin Hart gathered his squad of Marines. He told them what was happening. He told them the Krell were dangerous and their weapons were advanced. He told them many of them might not come home. But he also told them that they would be fighting for millions of innocent lives. "We are Terran Marines," he said to his soldiers. "We were trained for this moment. We will not fail." The soldiers saluted and moved to their stations. They checked their weapons. They packed their equipment. They said goodbye to friends and family through recorded messages. Some prayed. Some wrote letters. Some simply sat alone with their thoughts. Captain Monroe stood in the command center of her ship, the HMS Defiant. She watched as the crew prepared for the jump. Every screen showed data about the ships, the journey, and the situation they would face. The numbers were not good. The Krell fleet was 3 times larger than the human force. The Krell ships were bigger and had more weapons. By every measure of military strength, the Krell were superior. But Captain Monroe had seen something in Kevin Hart's face. She had seen it in the faces of all her soldiers. She had seen determination. She had seen courage. She had seen the willingness to die for something larger than themselves. "Sound the departure alarm," she commanded. The alarm rang through all 12 human warships. The engines began to warm. The weapons came online. The shields activated. The stars above Kepler Station began to glow as the ships prepared to leave normal space. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump," Captain Monroe announced over the communication channel. "Set course for the Valorian Coalition. We jump in 3 minutes." The countdown started. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. The human ships glowed with energy as they pushed toward the barrier between normal space and hyperspace. The barrier opened. The ships moved forward. For a moment, the universe turned inside out. Stars and planets twisted and bent. Colors that had no names flashed through the darkness. Then everything stopped. The ships moved through hyperspace now, traveling faster than light. Faster than any speed that made sense to the human mind. In the darkness of space behind them, Kepler Station continued its normal work. But the humans who remained there knew everything had changed. Somewhere far away, human soldiers were about to fight for the first time. And if they failed, the Krull would keep coming. Eventually, the Krull would reach Earth itself. Meanwhile, in the Coalition's command center on Valori's Prime, General Zethus received the news that human ships were coming. He read the message with confusion. Humans were supposed to be weak. They had only recently joined the galaxy's larger community. Their ships were small. Their weapons were weak, but they were coming. And they were coming to fight. General Zethus did not know if the humans could help. He did not know if they would even survive their first battle. But he knew that the Coalition needed anyone willing to fight. He gave orders to prepare a position for the human fleet. The Coalition's many species waited in the darkness. The Krull were coming. And now, for the first time, they would face an enemy they had not expected. They would face humanity. The jump from hyperspace was violent and sudden. The human fleet emerged above Valori's Prime in a burst of light and energy. What they saw was worse than any report had described. The planet below was being torn apart. Massive Krull warships hung above the surface like hungry beasts. Explosions covered the land. Entire cities were burning. The Coalition defense stations in orbit were already destroyed or falling. Thousands of people were running through the streets, trying to escape. Captain Lisa Monroe watched the destruction on her screens. She felt the weight of every life being lost. But she did not have time for emotion. She had a job to do. "Launch all fighters," she commanded. "Get them between the Krull and the civilian zones. Start evacuation protocols on the largest cities." The human fighters roared out of their bays. 20 fast, small ships with Terran pilots cut through space toward the Krull fleet. On the ground, evacuation ships began loading people as fast as they could. A message came through the radio. It was General Zethus, the veteran Valorian commander. His voice was hard and angry. "Human captain, we did not expect you to arrive so soon. Your ships are small. Your weapons appear weak. I have assigned you to defend the eastern perimeter of the planet. There are perhaps 50,000 civilians in that zone. Try not to be killed immediately." It was not a kind greeting. It was not a message of hope. General Zethus clearly did not believe humans could help. But he was desperate, and desperate people accept any help they can find. "We will hold the line," Captain Monroe replied. "You have my word." She broke the connection and turned to Kevin Hart. "Take your Marines down to the surface. Get them to the evacuation zones. I want those civilians off this planet alive." Kevin Hart nodded. He gathered his squad and they moved to the assault shuttles. The shovels were fast and heavily armed. They cut through the Krell fire and descended toward the planet's surface. The Krell attack came fast and without warning. 3 massive Krell warships turned their weapons on the human fleet. The energy beams shot through space like lightning. They were designed to destroy battleships, and human ships were not battleships. The HM's Defiant took a direct hit. Explosions rocked the ship. Alarms screamed, but the captain remained calm. "Return fire," she ordered. "All weapons. Do not let them form a targeting pattern." The Krell expected their larger ships to be safe in any battle. They expected to crush their enemies through sheer overwhelming force. But they had never fought the Terrans before. The human pilots were fast and clever. They did not try to meet the Krell head-to-head. Instead, they used speed and smart thinking. A human fighter pilot named Daniel cross-flew his small ship directly at a Krell warship's hull. The Krell weapons operator tracked him, ready to fire. But Daniel pulled up at the last moment and flew underneath the ship. The Krell weapons could not angle down far enough to hit him. He fired his own weapons at the ship's engines. The engines exploded in bright fire. Across the battle, the other human pilots did the same thing. They found the weaknesses in the Krell ships. They found angles the big weapons could not defend. They worked together, creating confusion and damage where the Krell expected easy victory. Below on the ground, Kevin Hart and his Marines were doing the same thing. They had landed near a city called Valori City. The Krell were moving toward the evacuation sites, trying to kill the fleeing civilians. "Set up defensive positions," Kevin Hart called to his soldiers. "Sergeant Marcus Williams, take your squad to the western approach. Corporal Amanda Brady, prepare the heavy weapons on the northern ridge. We hold this ground." The Krell soldiers came forward like a wave. They were twice the size of humans, with thick gray skin and multiple arms. They carried weapons that burned with energy. They had been trained for war since birth. The Terran Marines were smaller and weaker individually, but they were faster. They could think. They could change tactics in a moment. They could work together with perfect coordination. The first battle lasted 3 hours. The Marines fought and died and refused to back down. When one position became too dangerous, they moved to another. When a new attack came from an unexpected direction, they were ready. They did not fight like the Krell expected. They did not form rigid lines that could be broken. They fought like moving water, flexible and impossible to grasp. A Krell commander named Varthax watched from his command position. He was confused. These humans were not supposed to be strong enough to resist. They were not supposed to be smart enough to avoid his attacks. They were not supposed to stand their ground and force his soldiers backward. But they were doing all of those things in orbit. Captain Monroe watched as the battle turned. The Krell had expected to destroy the human fleet in minutes. Instead, the Krell fleet was taking serious damage. One large warship was already crippled. Another was falling out of orbit toward the planet. "Continue the pressure," she ordered. "Keep them off balance. Do not let them regroup." The human ships moved like dancers, avoiding the heavy attacks and delivering quick strikes when they could. It was not a way of fighting that the Krell understood. It was not the way of their empire. But it was working. As the afternoon turned to evening, something changed. The Krell attack stopped. The Krell ships pulled back. The Krell soldiers on the ground began to retreat. Kevin Hart watched them go from his position. His Marines cheered. They had not won a great victory. They had not destroyed the Krell force. But they had held the ground. They had saved the 50,000 civilians in that zone. The evacuations were complete. General Zethus made a broadcast to all coalition forces. The human fleet has proven themselves in battle. They have shown courage and skill. The Krell are not unstoppable. Stand firm. We will push them back. For the first time in months, hope returned to the coalition worlds. Humans had arrived. Humans had fought. And humans had not failed. But the battle was just the beginning. The real war was only starting. The Krell would return. And next time, they would be prepared for what the Terrans could do. On the ground, Kevin Hart gathered his wounded soldiers. They had lost good people. 12 Marines were dead. 30 more were wounded. He thought of their families back on Earth. He thought about what Captain Monroe would say to these families, but he did not have time to think about sadness. More Krell would come. More battles would come. The war had begun, and humanity had announced itself to the galaxy through smoke and fire and the courage of soldiers who refused to fall. 2 weeks passed. The human fleet and the coalition forces fought through battle after battle. They won some fights and lost others. The Krell were learning that humans could not be easily destroyed, that they still believed they would eventually win. The Krell had the larger fleet and the bigger weapons. They had more soldiers and more supplies. Time, they believed, was on their side. General Zethus understood something different. He knew the Krell would keep attacking until the coalition broke. He knew his forces were getting weaker, not stronger. He knew his planets were running out of soldiers and supplies. He studied the maps and the battle reports. The conclusion was always the same. Without a decisive victory, the coalition would lose. The Fortress of Eternal Dawn was the last great stronghold on Valori's Prime. It was an ancient structure, built thousands of years ago when the Valorians were at their height of power. The fortress had walls that could withstand any normal weapon. The fortress had weapons that could defend the entire planet. But the fortress was now damaged from weeks of battle. It was not fully staffed. The soldiers inside were tired and wounded. General Zethus received reports of massive Krell movement toward the fortress. The Krell were planning a final crushing assault. Their entire fleet was being repositioned. Their entire army was being concentrated in one place. They would attack with everything they had. The fortress would fall. The planet would fall. The coalition would fall. General Zethus called a war meeting with Captain Lisa, Monroe, and Kevin Hart. They met in a secure command center deep underground. Maps showing the battle situation covered every wall. The Krell will attack the fortress in 3 days, General Zethus said. Our estimates show we can hold for 2 days. Perhaps 3 if we are fortunate. After that, they will break through and take the planet. All remaining civilians will be enslaved or killed. How many civilians are still on the planet? Captain Monroe asked. 2 million. General Zethus replied. Mostly in the cities surrounding the fortress. All our transport ships are damaged. We cannot evacuate them in time. Kevin Hart looked at the map. He studied the positioning of the Krell fleet. He thought about what he knew of Krell tactics and strategy. Then he saw something. What is the Krell command structure like? He asked. All their attacks are coordinated from one location, General Zethus said. Their command ship, the Vortex Supreme. It is the largest ship in their fleet. All orders flow from there. Where is it positioned? Kevin Hart asked. Behind their main force, approximately 100 kilometers from the fortress. It is protected by an entire task force of smaller warships. It is impossible to reach. Kevin Hart looked at Captain Monroe. She was already thinking the same thing he was thinking. It is not impossible, Kevin Hart said. It is only difficult. You are suggesting what I think you are suggesting. Captain Monroe asked. If we can destroy their command ship, the Krell will lose coordination. Their attack will fall apart. The fortress will hold. The planet will be saved. General Zethus stood up from the table. You are talking about suicide, he said. A small team cannot possibly reach the command ship and return alive. No, Kevin Hart said. Probably not. but they might reach it. They might destroy it. That is all the fortress needs. Captain Monroe spoke quietly. I will not order anyone to do this. I can only volunteer. Kevin Hart did not hesitate. I volunteer. I want to lead the mission. 5 more Marines volunteered. Then 5 more. By the time the sign-up sheet was full, 30 Marines wanted to go on the mission. Captain Monroe selected 20 of the finest. She selected Sergeant Marcus Williams, who had fought with courage in every battle. She selected Corporal Amanda Brady, the best pilot in the human fleet. And she selected Kevin Hart to lead them all. They prepared through the night. They loaded a single attack shuttle with weapons and explosives. The shuttle was fast and small. It had advanced cloaking systems that could hide it from detection. It had enough firepower to make Krell soldiers think twice before attacking, but the real weapon was sitting in the pilot's seat. Amanda Brady was a pilot unlike any other. She had flown through impossible situations. She had saved her entire squad more than once through impossible flying. If anyone could navigate through a Krell fleet and reach the command ship, it was her. As the sun rose on the day of the attack, the team gathered at the shuttle. Kevin Hart looked at each face. These were soldiers. These were people willing to die for the cause. These were humans who understood that sometimes the only way to win was to risk everything. When we take off, we will fly low and fast, Kevin Hart told them. Amanda will navigate us through their lines. Our weapons are limited, but they are enough if we are smart. We get to the command ship. We plant the explosives. We destroy that ship. Then we get out. If we do not get out, we die knowing we saved 2 million lives. What if we fail? Asked Sergeant Marcus Williams. Then the fortress falls and the planet is lost. But at least we tried. At least we fought. That is all any human can do. The shuttle engines roared to life. Amanda Brady pushed the throttle forward. The shuttle raced down the runway and lifted into the sky. Above, the stars waited. And somewhere in the darkness, the Krell command ship waited. Amanda Brady flew like no one else could fly. She dodged Krell patrol ships. She flew between 2 larger warships so close that the humans inside the shuttle could feel the heat of the nearby engines. She used every trick and every technique she knew. The Krell were looking for enemies, but they were not looking for one small shuttle. The Krell were looking for large fleet movements. They were not prepared for individual bravery. They were not ready for the kind of tactics that humans could use. Kevin Hart watched on his screens as they approached the command ship. It was enormous. It had more guns than Kevin Hart had ever seen. It had enough firepower to destroy 100 human shuttles. We are going in, Amanda Brady said. She did not sound afraid. She only sounded determined. The shuttle descended toward the command ship. Amanda dove toward the massive hull. The Krell weapons began to fire. Explosions surrounded them. But Amanda moved the shuttle like it was part of her own body. She twisted and turned. She avoided every blast. They hit the hull with impact that threw everyone forward. Kevin Hart and his Marines charged out of the shuttle and into the ship. They faced Krell soldiers in the corridors. They fought with guns and with blades. They lost soldiers. They killed more Krell. They moved deeper into the ship. Kevin Hart reached the reactor chamber. He placed the explosives and armed them. The countdown began. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. The Marines ran. They ran back through the corridors. They ran to the shuttle. Amanda was waiting with her engines hot and ready. The shuttle lifted from the hull just as the explosives detonated. The command ship tore itself apart. The explosion lit up the sky. The Krell fleet lost their coordination. Without orders, without direction, their attack fell apart. The fortress did not fall. The planet was saved. 2 million lives were saved by 20 Marines willing to die. and as the shuttle flew back to base with its survivors, everyone knew something had changed. Humans could not be ignored anymore. Humans could not be dismissed. Humans were warriors of the stars. The destruction of the Krell command ship changed everything. Without orders, the Krell fleet became confused. Without leadership, the Krell soldiers lost their focus. The coalition forces pushed forward with new strength. Within 3 weeks, the Krell were forced to retreat from the inner coalition worlds. Within a month, they were pushed back across 5 sectors. The immediate threat was over, but the cost had been terrible. The Terran fleet had started with 5,000 soldiers and sailors. Now only 3,000 remained combat ready. The rest were dead or wounded in medical bays. The human ships had taken so much damage that 5 of them would never fly again. The resources that humanity had sent were nearly depleted. Everything they had brought to this war was being used up. More than 700 human soldiers had died. More than 2,000 were wounded. Every single human who had come to help the coalition had been changed by what they had seen and done. Kevin Hart stood in the hospital ward at the base. He walked past rows of beds containing wounded Marines. Many of them would recover. Some would not. Some would survive, but never be the same. A young soldier named Robert Kelly had lost his right arm. Another named Diana Foster had lost her sight. They had both given their bodies to save the coalition. At the end of the ward, Kevin Hart found Amanda Brady. She was sitting up in her bed, looking out a window at the stars. Her left leg was wrapped in medical equipment. Her face was marked with burn scars, but her eyes were still bright and alert. "Captain Hart," she said, smiling when she saw him. "Amanda," he said. He sat beside her bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a falling building," she said. "The doctors say I will walk again. It will take time, but I will walk. I'm more concerned about flying." "You will fly again," Kevin Hart said. "You are the best pilot I have ever known. A few injuries will not change that." Amanda reached out and took his hand. 17 of the 20 Marines on that mission did not come back, she said. "I keep thinking about their faces. I keep thinking about their families." Kevin Hart had no words that would help. He only held her hand and sat with her in silence. Over the next week, Kevin Hart attended 17 funerals. The coalition had created a special cemetery on Valor's Prime. They had planted it with soil from every world that the coalition protected. They had carved memorials for every species that had fought and died together. The funerals were difficult. Each Marine had been someone. Each one had a family. Each one had dreams and hopes that would never be realized. Kevin Hart met parents who had lost their children. He met wives who had lost their husbands. He met children who no longer had a parent. He did not have good words to tell them. He only told them the truth. He told them their loved ones had died fighting for millions of innocent lives. He told them their deaths had meaning. He told them the coalition would not forget. A woman named Patricia Thompson came to speak with Kevin Hart after her son's funeral. Her son, Daniel Thompson, had been one of the brave pilots who died in the battle over Valor's Prime. Did he suffer? She asked. Kevin Hart thought about lying. He thought about making it easy for her, but he knew she deserved truth. "Yes," he said. His ship was hit. He ejected, but the escape pod was damaged. He tried to reach a coalition station, but he did not make it. "I am sorry," Patricia Thompson cried. Kevin Hart held her as she fell apart. There was nothing more important than this moment. There was nothing more necessary than standing with someone in their pain. 2 weeks after the major battle, the Coalition Council held a formal ceremony. General Zethus stood before representatives from all the species that made up the coalition. Behind them stood humans in dress uniforms. Captain Lisa Monroe stood with Kevin Hart beside her. "We gathered to acknowledge those who have given everything," General Zethus began. "The Krell Empire came to destroy us. They believed we were weak and divided. They believed we would fall. But they did not understand courage. They did not understand what happens when different species stand together." He paused and looked directly at Captain Monroe. "The human fleet arrived when we most needed help. They fought battles they had never fought before. They lost soldiers they could not replace. They asked for nothing in return. And through their sacrifice, they have saved our worlds and our peoples." General Zethus raised his arm in a gesture of respect. "I stand before this council and declare that the Terran Collective has earned full membership in the Valorian Coalition. Humans are no longer guests or observers. They are our equals. They are our warriors. They are our brothers and sisters in this galaxy." The announcement shocked many council members. The Solvan delegation, who had always considered humans primitive, seemed ready to argue. But General Zethus continued. "These humans bled on our worlds. These humans died on our worlds. These humans, who we did not believe could help us, changed the course of a war that we were losing. If that is not worthy of equal status, then I do not understand the meaning of honor." The other coalition species began to stand and acknowledge the humans. The Valorians stood. The Vethrans stood. Even, after a long moment, the Solvan representatives stood. It was not enthusiastic, but it was acceptance. Captain Monroe stepped forward. She was a military officer, and she spoke like one. "Humanity accepts this honor with gratitude. We will protect the coalition as faithfully as we protect our own people. We will stand with you against any threat. We will remember those who died here, and we will ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain." Kevin Hart watched as his captain spoke for all of humanity. He thought about the Marines in the hospital. He thought about Patricia Thompson and the other families grieving their dead. He thought about the future and what it would bring. That evening, Kevin Hart sat alone in his quarters. He received a communication from Earth. It was Captain Monroe sending the official report to Terran Military Command. The message would reach Earth in 3 weeks. It would describe the battles. It would describe the victory. It would describe the human soldiers who had died. Kevin Hart thought about what would happen after that message arrived. He thought about young people on Earth who would hear about the war and the victory. He thought about them signing up for the military. He thought about how many of them would come to the coalition and fight just as hard as the soldiers who had already died. The price of courage was high, but humans had learned something about themselves in this war. They had learned that they could stand among the greater powers of the galaxy. They had learned that they could fight and win. They had learned that they could change the course of history. And they had learned that some prices were worth paying. 3 months after the final battle, the Krell Empire pulled their remaining forces back to their core worlds. They still controlled a large section of space, but they no longer threatened the coalition. The war had not ended completely, but the immediate danger was over. The coalition had survived. The planets had been saved. The people could begin to rebuild. Kevin Hart was promoted to captain. The Coalition Council gave him command of a joint task force made up of ships from 7 different species. Humans served alongside Valorians, Vethrans, Solvans, and others. They flew under unified command with unified purpose. They trained together and learned from each other. Captain Kevin Hart's first order was to establish a military academy on Kepler Station. The station would serve all Coalition species. Young officers from every world would come to learn tactics, strategy, and leadership. They would learn how different species thought and fought. They would learn to work together in ways that had never been possible before. The academy would be called the Valori's prime academy of military sciences. Its motto was simple: united in strength, equal in purpose. On Earth, Captain Lisa Monroe stood before the Terran Senate. The chamber was packed with politicians, journalists, and citizens who wanted to hear about the war. Captain Monroe wore her dress uniform. Her medal showed every battle she had fought. Her face showed the weight of the losses. She described the journey to the coalition space. She described the first battle where humans proved they could fight. She described the desperate mission to destroy the command ship. She described the soldiers who had died and the families they had left behind. Humanity has entered the galactic community as equals, Captain Monroe told the Senate. We came as unknowns, and we leave as warriors. 738 Terran soldiers gave their lives in this war. Every one of them died for something larger than themselves. They died for the coalition. They died for people they would never meet. They died because it was the right thing to do. The Senate held a moment of silence for the fallen. Then Captain Monroe continued. The coalition has offered humanity full membership. They have recognized us as a spacefaring civilization with the right to vote, the right to trade, and the right to defend ourselves. More importantly, they have recognized that humans have something to offer the galaxy. They have recognized our courage, our innovation, and our determination to protect innocent lives. The news spread across Earth. Television networks broadcast Captain Monroe's speech. Every news outlet discussed the war and the victory. Young people across Earth began signing up for the Terran Marine Corps. They wanted to be part of something larger. They wanted to serve the coalition. They wanted to be warriors like Kevin Hart and Marcus Williams. Within a month, enlistment in the Terran military had doubled. Within 3 months, it had tripled. The new recruits came from every nation on Earth, from every background, with every skill. They came because they had heard the stories. They came because they wanted to be heroes. Sergeant Marcus Williams was promoted to major. He was asked to return to Earth and help train the new soldiers coming into the military. Marcus accepted the position, but with one condition. He wanted to return to Kepler Station to serve as the chief combat instructor at the academy. I want to teach everyone, he told Captain Hart. I want to teach humans. Valorians, veterans, and every other species how to fight with courage and honor. I want to make sure that every officer who leaves that academy understands what we learned in this war. I want them to understand that small and weak can defeat large and strong if you have intelligence and determination. Captain Hart approved the assignment. Marcus Williams became the Academy's first head combat instructor. Corporal Amanda Brady recovered faster than the doctors expected. Her leg healed within 2 months. She began physical therapy and began flying again within 3 months. She was offered a position as the chief flight instructor at Kepler Station. She accepted without hesitation. Amanda had learned that flying with purpose and passion was the only way she wanted to fly. Teaching the next generation of pilots, teaching them to think beyond what seemed possible, seemed like the perfect use of her talents. 6 months after the war, the Kepler Station Academy held its opening ceremony. Officers from every coalition species came to begin their training. Humans trained beside Valorians. They learned combat techniques from each other. They studied strategy together. They began to understand how to fight as a unified force. Captain Kevin Hart gave the opening address to the first class. This academy exists because of sacrifice, he told the young officers. 738 humans died to earn our place here. Thousands of coalition soldiers died defending their worlds. But their deaths were not meaningless. They created the possibility that we stand before you today. Officers from different species, learning together, working toward a common goal. He paused and looked across the assembly hall at the young faces watching him. You are the future of the coalition. You will face dangers that we cannot predict. You will encounter enemies that we cannot imagine, but you will not face them alone. You will fight beside warriors from other worlds. You will learn from officers with different perspectives. You will become stronger because you work together. That is the lesson of this war. That is the lesson of Valori's Prime. That is the lesson that cost us so much blood and sacrifice to learn. United, we are stronger than any enemy. Divided, we fall. Remember that as you train here. Remember that as you lead. Remember that as you fight. On Valori's Prime, at the Fortress of Eternal Dawn, work crews had begun constructing a memorial. It would be a statue of a human marine and a Valorian warrior standing back to back, facing enemies from opposite directions. Around the base would be carved the names of every soldier who had died during the siege. When the memorial was completed, a dedication ceremony was held. General Zethus stood beside Captain Kevin Hart as they unveiled the statue. The crowd gathered included soldiers from 7 different species and civilians from across the coalition. This memorial stands to show that courage knows no species, General Zethus said. That honor belongs to all beings who stand against darkness. That sacrifice made in defense of innocent life is remembered and honored forever. He placed his hand on Kevin Hart's shoulder. When the Krell first attacked, I believed the coalition would fall. I did not have faith in anyone or anything. I was wrong. I was wrong about many things, but most importantly, I was wrong about humans. I thought you were weak and primitive. I thought you would fail. Instead, you changed the course of history. Kevin Hart looked at the statue. He thought about the soldiers whose names were carved there. He thought about the families they had left behind. He thought about Amanda Brady and Marcus Williams and all the other survivors who carried the weight of what they had experienced. We were just doing our job, Kevin Hart said simply. We were protecting people who needed protection. That is what soldiers do. But even as he said it, he knew it was more than that. The humans had proven something to the galaxy. They had proven that intelligence and courage and determination could matter as much as size and strength. They had proven that a new species could stand among the ancient powers. They had proven that humanity belonged among the stars. As the sun set over Valori's Prime, casting long shadows across the memorial, Kevin Hart looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Krell were waiting. Somewhere, other dangers were forming. The war for the Coalition's survival was not over. There would be more battles. There would be more sacrifices. But now, humanity would face those battles as equals. Now, when the galaxy called for aid, Terran Marines would emerge from the darkness, ready to fight, ready to sacrifice, ready to win. The future was uncertain, but it belonged to all of them now. Humans and aliens together, standing on the edge of the galaxy, ready for whatever came next.